Hey, this is Briefing with the Chief. I am your host, Patrick Jordan. Hey, we divorced to some degree, an amicable divorce from KJRA. So I am now operating my own YouTube channel, and I just want to tell you, I appreciate those of you who have migrated over to listen to the show and watch the show. I'm approaching 700 views in my first week. That's pretty good for a brand new show on YouTube. So I'm pretty happy about that. But I want to remind you, if you're watching the show, make sure you follow me. Follow the Chief on YouTube at Briefing with the Chief. Make sure you like the show, you share the show, and do me a favor, make a comment. If you want me to address a subject, let me know in the comments as well. Comment on what I said, comment on the subject, and if you want me to address a particular subject, comment on that too. Now, last week's show, I focused on how ICE is saving lives, and ICE is all over the news, and it just continues, just continues. Now, I was gonna do a lead segment where it showed the Minneapolis troopers coming in and dealing with the disorder in the state. And finally, they're doing something. Finally, and it sounds like Waltz had a conversation with the president, and so it looks like he's figuring out I got to do something. And one of the things that I do, you can find me on X at LSD Jordan, and I am approaching, I'm at 1,300 certified followers, 5,000 regular followers. And I would appreciate you to migrate over to X at LASD Jordan and follow me there as well. But one of the things I do on X is I go on the spaces, and there's 3 spaces or 4 spaces that I jump in fairly regularly. There's the punch bowl first thing in the morning. And there's medical stealth, which is more of an occasional. I drop in there every now and then. They deal with the geopolitical issues. I'm not always interested in that issue, but they also deal with anti-Semitism, and I'm very concerned about that issue. So I drop in there and visit the folks there. And then there is the Main Street meets Wall Street. It's a couple. One is a retired NYPD officer and his wife. Jay talks about the crime stuff and the public policy stuff, and his wife talks about stocks. Well, she talks about everything, but she gives a stock update, or she gives an update on the economy as well, and it's good. And I've been on that one a lot more lately, and then I jump on Walter Kurtz's political theater show. He's been a little dark lately, but I'm sure he'll come back. I do catch him on other spaces, and he has a Substack. You can check him out, Walter Kurtz. WC Dispatch on Substack. And so I jump on these spaces. And one of the things that I said on these spaces, and I'm going to reinforce this, if you look at what's going on in Los Angeles, you look at what's going on in New York City, you look at what's going on in Chicago as it relates to ICE, one of the things that the locals have decided is to let their police officers and their troopers and their sheriffs deal with the disorder that is occurring as this enforcement stuff is going on, this ICE enforcement stuff is going on. Now, of course, they all say it's ICE's fault. They're causing all this disorder. That's not true. It's these leftists that are causing disorder. But they have an obligation to deal with disorder in their cities, and they've chosen to deal with it. I think they've done the political calculus that they're going to lose more by not dealing with the disorder than they're going to gain by having the disruption because ICE is doing street enforcement. And I pointed out that Minneapolis chose a different path. They don't do anything on disorder until yesterday. So they probably looked around at their other blue states and other blue cities and other blue counties and said, "Oh my God, they're doing it differently. Maybe we ought to." What's that one? Oh, I should have had a V8. I should have done it the way they're doing it because they're getting a lot less criticism. In fact, the polls show that although people might not be happy with how ICE is doing it, they're happy with deportations. But those same people are not happy with how the left, the protesters, and what they are doing. So the Democrats are not gaining ground with these protests. They're actually losing ground. So I think people are making political calculuses. And that's why you see a little different change of pace in Minneapolis. We'll see if Minnesota and Minneapolis continue to deal with the disorder in their town and let ICE do their job. I am not confident that they got the message fully, but we'll see. But if you're on the spaces, you'll hear me give this analysis on a regular basis. If you watch Briefing with the Chief, I give this analysis on a regular basis here, at least once a week now. After I get back from my trip, my international trip that I'm taking in a couple of weeks, I will probably start, in addition to a weekly show, do some briefs with the Chiefs where I just do short clips where I talk about what's in the news, so that I don't have to make you wait a whole week to hear what the chief has to say about some stuff. I will jump in on my channel and on X and get that opinion out there so you guys can hear what I think about what is emerging in the news. So because last week's show was pretty successful, how ICE is saving lives and how ICE is reducing the overdose death rates in the country. We talked about that. The actual reduction in overdose deaths from 2024 to 2025 was about 12,000 people. They're alive today, I think, in large part due to the actions of ICE and the Trump administration in reducing crime and disorder in our country, but also targeting the cartels, targeting their network in our country. And last week's show, I showed you the saturation of the cartels in our country. And it is a no-brainer. When you drop the hammer on them, you're going to reduce crime and you're going to reduce overdose death rates because you're disrupting their networks. You're making it harder for them to sling their dope, to engage in their trade. That's what it's all about. And Trump said he was going to do it. You don't have to like Trump, but you have to acknowledge, and the media won't do this, you have to acknowledge that his policies are having impact. So because of the success of last week's show, I had to do ICE Saves Life Part 2. And I was going to bring Sheriff Swank on. I'll have to do him down the road. But I have to do ICE Saves Life Part 2, and I decided to speed up my research on homicides around the country, reduction of homicides, and do the correlation of ICE activities and ICE enforcements and how that has impacted the reduction of homicides in this country. But before I do that, I had an idiot last week that I profiled on this show, Idiot of the Week #1. That was Bruce Springsteen and stupid comments. But I got another one. They just keep popping up, And this one's Mamdani. He's the mayor of New York, and we're going to lead by talk. We're going to listen to what he has to say, and then I'm going to break down how he's lying to you. He's either stupid or he's just lying to you. I think he's probably lying to you, but let's hear what he has to say.
Do you think ICE is coming to New York City?
We're going to do everything in our power to ensure that what we see elsewhere, we keep making the case directly to the president, directly to New Yorkers, to Americans, that these kinds of actions, they are the actions of a reckless agency that is operating with impunity, one that deserves to be abolished, frankly, and that they do nothing to actually serve public interest. The other thing I'd say is you have to prepare in advance. In the same way that with this snowstorm, the reason we're able to actually respond to it on the day of the storm is not because sanitation's there on the morning of, it's because Friday morning they've brined all the highways and major roadways. Similarly, if we're talking about the prospect of ICE coming here, we have to ensure New Yorkers actually know their rights. New Yorkers know what it means to be a sanctuary city, that we have a law department that's ready to use the courts as one form of the battleground. That's what we're also preparing for.
Has no impact on public safety. Now, if you listened to my show last week, obviously he either doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, which is a strong possibility, or he's just lying to you, which is probably the correct answer. And so he's the idiot of the week, and we're going to get into why. Let me talk about what is going on in New York State and New York City in terms of enforcement of ICE in 2025. And so I pulled it up on, let's see, Google AI. Now, some of the stuff is inaccurate, but it lines up with everything, all my other research. So I think I think we can live with this because this stuff, some of the bad stuff in, you get bad stuff out, but it lines up with all the other information that I have from around the country. So we'll read it to you, and we will give it a certification of probably good information, right? Well, specific New York State deportation numbers for 2025 versus 2024 aren't finalized. Federal enforcement surged under the Trump administration in 2025, led to significant increases overall U.S. deportations and ICE arrests. So they're going up, right? With reports indicating a dramatic rise in New York City ICE arrests and detentions. We're going to get in why that's important, why this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, compared to 2024, driven by crackdowns focusing on convicted criminals. Any cop knows if you want to reduce crime, you focus on those people who have previous records. So that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing in New York, and the numbers have jumped substantially. Increased ICE arrests in New York City. ICE arrests in New York City surpassed 2024 totals within the first half of the Trump administration. So the first 6 months, 2025, they surpassed 24 totals, with a 150% increase in deportations reported in New York City by December of 2025 compared to the prior year. So what does that mean? That means, let's see, what is, in summary, expect substantially higher New York City deportation numbers in 2025 compared to 2024, driven by an aggressive federal immigration policies and increased ICE operations, although precise states level final figures in 2025 will emerge later in the year. Okay, so basically they're doing a lot of enforcement. They're focusing on criminals, and I guess I got to do this a little early here. I was going to do this a little later in the show, but let's talk about criminals. What happens when you take a criminal off the street? Well, you're taking them off the street for just one crime. You're taking them off the street for that crime, but you're also preventing dozens of other crimes from happening. Any cop worth his salt knows that if you are focusing on career criminals, you stand a really good chance. This is why 3 strikes worked. You took people who were in the game, in the life, committing crimes, you put them away after the 3 serious crimes, and crime went down, right? It is the same principle. In this case, we're focusing on migrants. Now let's talk about 2 buckets of people who are different, right? You got American citizens who may be in the criminal life, right? They're in the game, they're committing crimes, they're career criminals. We don't like them, but they're American citizens. Then you got immigrants. They're committing crimes. So, and I'm not saying that all immigrants commit crime. We're talking about immigrants who are in the life. They're in the criminal lifestyle, right? They are here based upon, it's a privilege for them to be here. They don't have a right to be here. U.S. citizens, they have a right to be here, right? Criminals, aliens, they don't have a right to be here. So you use all the tools in your toolbox to reduce crime in a neighborhood. And one of the tools, when you're dealing with migrants, if they don't have a right to stay here because they've been convicted of a crime, you get rid of them so they don't commit more crimes. It's pretty basic. That is what Trump is doing. It is a good, solid policy. Anybody who understands law enforcement, anybody who understands the criminal justice system, anybody who understands the psychology of a criminal, understands that this policy will lower crime. And that is exactly what is happening. You don't have to like Trump. You don't have to like ICE. You don't have to like the ugly pictures that you see on the TV, but you have to acknowledge it's having an impact, as I showed last week in ICE Saves Lives Part 1, we're reducing the overdose death rates. So that is what we're focusing on here. And I'm going to go through some of the numbers in some of the states or some of the cities that are benefiting the most from it. And we'll get to New York here in a minute. But that's what's going on. And that's why we have to support ICE. We have to look at the broader context of what is going on here. The other thing that this flooding of the zone with ICE federal officers, it debunks this whole nonsense. And if you defund the police and you just give the money to community programs, it's going to help everybody. You know how they say that? Cops are all bad. We got to defund them and give the money to community programs, and crime will go down. Well, this debunks that. Crime went up after we defunded the police. Trump floods the zone with federal officers. Doesn't matter what officers you flood them with. It'd be state troopers, police officers, deputy sheriffs, federal officers. When you flood the zone and you take criminals out of circulation, crime goes down. That is what is happening, and that is what the media is not talking about. They look for these flashpoint issues, the shooting of Alex Purdy and Renee Good, and they focus on those to say life is bad, and they focus on imagery that looks bad. It's not tactically bad, it just looks bad, because most people don't see a cop taking somebody to jail every day, and now they're seeing it on their TV every single day, and they're focusing on that by design to cause the public to reduce the public support for ICE operations. And they're not talking about the positive impact, but we're talking about the positive impact here on a briefing with the chief in terms of reduction in overdose deaths. And think about that: 12,000 people are alive in 2025 because of reduction of overdose deaths. Think about their families. Think about the impact on the communities because they're alive. We don't talk about that, right? We're 2026 now, but in 2025, that's the amount of people's lives that were saved from overdose death rates. Think about that. And now we're going to talk about homicides. But let's get into, I think we want to talk about, Trump did a press conference on crime, and I think it's important that we are losing the PR war, and Trump and his administration are fighting back a little bit on this whole battle. The left has managed to capture most of the mainstream media, And we're losing the PR war. Unfortunately, when I say we, I mean people who are supportive of the policies that Trump is using right now. And let's go with that video with Trump.
Very important. We're going to be focusing on crime in the cities, and we'll work with Democrat governors. Most of them are, as you know, if you look at the 25 worst places, they're just about all Democrat-controlled cities and states. And we're going to be working with Democrat governors and Democrat mayors. And I look forward to doing it. But we have to do something about crime, and mostly in our cities.
So that's it. What's he saying? My goal is to deal with crime in the cities. I have a tool. The tool is immigration enforcement. I'm going to use it. It hits two things that he ran on. I'm going to deport people out of this country or here illegally, but I'm also going to reduce crime. By focusing on this issue, he's impacting both of those issues by this aggressive enforcement of ICE laws and moving people out of our country who have committed crimes. And that's important. I think I got a slide in deportations by city. Let's throw that up here. And so I took a look at this, and if you take a look at this, you're gonna have to like expand it, I guess. But in Chicago has benefited the most. And you got three lines there. You got those people. The orange line is essentially the people who are here, but they have had a removal order. The second line is a light blue shade, and that is people who've been arrested but not convicted, and the third dark blue are people who've been convicted of crimes that have been deported. Now Chicago had an out of control homicide rate, and we'll get into them in a little bit, but you look at it, it's nearly 40,000. I got nearly 40,000 or 35,000 people that were deported out of Chicago in 2025. Think about that. And if you look at the number, it looks like probably 35% of them had a criminal record. 35% had a criminal record. And that's just those that had been convicted. If you add in the people that have been arrested, you're looking closer to 50%. Now you remove 12,000 people who are in the life, who are criminals, out of the city of Chicago, and you are going to have an impact on crime. You are going to save lives. You're going to stop women from being raped. You're going to stop robberies. You're going to stop high-level burglaries. You can go ahead and put that slide back up because I'm going to talk about these other ones here. And if you look at New York City, 28,000. You look at, let's see, we got Atlanta, 28,000. LA, 25,000. And we got Boston at 20,000. Okay, you can go ahead and take that down. So these are big numbers, and around 50% of them in many of these cities, and certainly nationally, are people who are in life. They're committing crimes, and when you remove them out of the communities, you're actually saving lives. You're reducing the number of criminals in a community. You're actually saving lives. And this is what Trump ran on. This is what he said he would do, and this is why this is important. Now let me talk a little bit about what you're seeing with somebody like Manbami or other people. They'll talk about how Trump isn't really living up to his promise where he said he would focus on criminals. And there was a report out by the Cato Institute, and they said, well, he's deporting other than convicted serious felons, right? And there's always this narrowing of that definition, right? They always narrow that definition of who they decide is in the criminal life, right? And the first thing they do to narrow that definition is they stop counting those people who've been arrested for crimes. Well, they haven't been convicted yet. They don't have their due process rights. Now, when you're here when you're here in a privilege, it's just a privilege for you to be here. If you're arrested by a police officer and you're taken to jail, let's talk about what due process happens at that point, because it's not just due process in court. What a police officer has to do is he has to have probable cause. Then he has to write that in a report. He has to gather the evidence, and then he has to take that. In my case, you took it to the sergeant, and the sergeant says, okay, yeah, it's there. And he signed off on your arrest review, and then you took it to the lieutenant, and the lieutenant said, okay, yeah, it's there. And then you had to submit it to a judge. You had to submit a probable cause declaration to a judge, and the judge had to say, oh, okay, yeah, your probable cause is there. That is what they call due process, folks. That is what they call due process. Now, as a citizen, you get all that same stuff. As a non-citizen who it's your privilege to be here, you get all that stuff too. Now, what is happening is ICE is saying, well, you've had some level of due process that have indicated that there's at least probable cause to indicate that a crime occurred and you committed it. That goes beyond what they call the preponderance of evidence standard, 50% plus one. That usually is good enough in administrative hearings and administrative courts. And what are we talking about with? What are we talking about with administration courts? They are administrative courts. They are level 2 judges. They're not level 3 crime beyond a reasonable doubt stuff. And so when you get arrested and you've had some level of due process that indicate that a crime occurred and you likely committed it, you're good to go. You're good to deport. The left will say, oh, no, they must go through a jury trial. They must do this. They must do that. No, that's not true. That doesn't have to happen. You can get rid of them just like that through the administrative process because they were arrested for the crime. And certainly when they're convicted of a crime, you can get rid of them. Then what else the left does is they say, okay, well, they'll say, okay, these people have been convicted, but they're not convicted of serious crimes. So let's just focus on serious crimes. Okay. Lots of times they'll decide serious crime only involves violent crime, right? So if you commit a $10 million fraud and steal government money, that you didn't hurt anybody. That wouldn't be considered a violent felon for some of these folks, right? Here's an interesting one. In the Cato Institute report, when I read it, I started looking at their criteria, right? So domestic violence was included, but domestic violence non-aggravated wasn't included. So what that means, if you slap your spouse around, you slap your wife around, and you give her a bloody nose and you break an arm, well, that's aggravated. We're going to convict you and deport you. If you don't draw blood and you don't break her arm, no big deal. We'll let you stay. Think about that. Think about that. So they decided that domestic violence, domestic battery, does not fit in their determination of violence. So we'll let you stay until you commit the felony one and get convicted of it, and then we'll deport you. So they don't include that. So there's a whole host of crimes that they part out. Here's another one. So you go into a bar, you're an immigrant, you go into a bar, you sock some guy up, but you don't break his nose, right? Okay, that's just a battery. Now that's a violent crime in my book. It may just be a misdemeanor, but it's still a violent crime. I think you ought to be deported because it's your privilege to be here, not your right to be here. And when you violate our laws, we want to get rid of you. But according to the left, oh no, it's not a serious felony. It's no big deal. Or if the DA decides not to prosecute, and here's the other thing that most people know. Many of these Soros-funded DAs stated publicly that if prosecuting a migrant impacted their immigration status, they were going to go with a lower charge or no charge at all. George Gascon said that in LA. So that's another, when you try to understand the criminal justice system and who's acting in the criminal justice system, just because somebody's arrested doesn't mean they're convicted, they deserve due process. No, we have a lot of dishonest actors who are circumventing what should happen in the criminal justice system because they want to make it a fair criminal justice system. Now, here's the other big one. Here's the other big one that when you understand the criminal justice system and we talk about the criminal justice system, if you're in it for a long period of time, you know it. So what happens is if I arrest somebody, say for robbery, a violent robbery, maybe it's just a force and fear. I stick a gun in your face and say, give me your purse, right? And I get it from you. That's force and fear, right? And I go to court and the DA says, hey, I'll make you a deal. We'll just call it a petty theft if you agree to a guilty plea, right? Well, we'll call it a felony petty theft because you've done it before. So we even give you an elevated one, right? So I plead to that and I go do my jail time and I come out. Well, the Cato Institute report and the leftist reports will say, well, he wasn't convicted of a violent crime because I pled out to a lesser but included offense that was not violent. So this is the games that they play. Now we are talking people who are really smart, PhDs, fellows at the Cato Institute, they know this. So when they put out a report without the caveats, without the clarity, without any of this stuff, they're not giving you the truth. They're trying to shape your thinking in a way that they want you to believe versus giving you the whole story so you can make a more informed decision. This is why I have a problem with a lot of these reports when they come out, because somebody's been in the profession for 38 years. And, I freely admit I'm a public policy nerd. I'm going to dive into reports and I'm going to try and dissect them, try and understand them. They are being dishonest with us. So when you understand, when the left throws this information out to you, be very careful and dig into it to make sure that you understand that they're not gaslighting you, that they're not lying to you, that you actually understand what they're talking about. Now let's talk about deportations in California. I think I got a video here. I got some good information on. Let's go with the video.
New data shows ICE removed at least 8,200 people in California from the U.S. in the first 9 months of 2025, with most of those deportations happening over the summer. And as the Department of Homeland Security plans to spend more money through the big, beautiful bill, let's go to KTVU's Crystal Bailey, who talked with community organizations about how they're preparing. Crystal?
Well, Claudine, most people I spoke with are not surprised. These numbers coincide with what we saw anecdotally over the summer, new enforcement tactics, as ICE started arresting people at courthouses who were there for scheduled immigration hearings. And then we started seeing those raids at Home Depots and construction sites. New data shows ICE deported at least 8,200 people from California between January and September 2025, with a historic surge over the summer. The numbers come from data released by ICE and collected by Deportation Data Project, an initiative led by a Berkeley Law School professor and immigration attorneys. For context, in 2024, ICE reported approximately 4,000 deportations from California. But by September 2025, that number already more than doubled, all in an effort to make good on President Trump's campaign promise for the largest mass deportation in history.
In the early summer in May 2025, Stephen Miller in the White House was demanding that ICE deport 3,000 people a day nationwide.
Immigration experts say tactics changed as ICE started going after folks who applied for asylum under the Biden administration.
Those folks were targeted for arrest by ICE because their asylum applications were just pending and they didn't have any protections.
That's good enough, Amanda, on this one.
Data, including immigration.
Yeah, that news report talks about the surge and the increase, and of course and this is where I'm talking about. When I say the mainstream media refuses to acknowledge the benefit of these deportations, they talk about how terrible it is. But I do have a report, and this is out of a Santa Barbara. So ICE deportations, C#. Let's throw that up there, and this is out of Santa Barbara. They put some pretty good data out, and so I'll use their source. It's ICE deportation C# surge in California in 2025 data shows. So let's see what they're saying in their report here. Let's see. They say, just like you heard on the news report, under Donald Trump, second term, ICE deported at least 8,250 people from California in the first 9 months. And they were on pace, according to this article, to deport 13,000 people from the state of California. So that's the whole state. Now, keep in mind, LA County represents about a quarter of the state. So if you're going to do 13, you're talking about 4,000 from LA County then, right? But let me talk about a very important number that doesn't really get talked about. Unfortunately, this periodical did. Citing federal data, the report says that 43% of those arrested in California had been convicted of a crime. Now, I just went over what it means to be convicted of a crime, and 14% had pending charges. So that means that adds up to 57% of the people picked up in the first 9 months in California had some, how does the left say it? They're part of the Justice Department. They have a term for it. I'll think of it here in a minute. Oh, justice involved. Their people are justice involved. That's how they say it. They're justice involved. Kind of like they just fell there, they just walked in and they're justice involved. No, they committed crimes and they're either waiting prosecution or they had been prosecuted, and ICE decided to take them away. Calgon, take me away, right? And they deported them. So when you permanently deport folks, plus you lock down the border so people can't come back, you have a positive impact on the community. As I talked in previous shows, when you lower crime, businesses come in and hope comes in, right? Because businesses come in, people have jobs, teenagers get jobs, young people get jobs, they build up a work record, and they can go on to bigger and better jobs. That's how the American dream works. High crime, as we saw after COVID, chased businesses out of communities. Lower crimes invites investment back in, invites hope back in. So Trump is doing exactly, remember he said, we're going to lower crime in these big cities. That's what he said. And that's exactly what's happening by getting rid 57%, first 9 months of the deportees from California had records. Now let's look at Los Angeles. I think I got a headline for Los Angeles. Here we go. And this is the LA Times. Now this is the example I have where the LA Times can't even give credit where credit's due, right? So LAC's lowest homicide rate in decades. But why killings are down is up for debate. So this is the LA Times. So let me read the numbers here so everybody is on the same page here. There were 230 homicides in Los Angeles in 2025. Now, I tell you, when I was working in the 80s and 90s, it was like over 600 in LA City's areas, and it was like at the 500s in LA County Sheriff's areas. It was off the hook in the 80s and 90s. It was violent, and we haven't seen anything like that, even with this uptick in the last few years. In LA City, let's see. Oh, okay. So it's in 2025, LAPD data shows in areas policed by the LA County Sheriff's Department. Disclaimer: that's my old alma mater. Killings fell to 159 last year. That's fantastic. The city of Los Angeles total is the fewest killings in a year since 1966. You can't tell me that ICE is not having an impact in Los Angeles, right? And the lowest per capita homicide rate since 1959. So what they mean by that is when they measure homicide rate, it's number of homicides per 100,000. So the lowest per capita. And I think, if I remember correctly, in 1993, it was 13.1 murders per 100,000 in the state of California. So they're talking that it's really low since 1959. And that's huge, right? Theories, and here's where the LA Times, God, you just got to love these guys. The theories about why crime has trended down include greater investment in the community program. So we defunded the police and we gave it to community programs. That has to be working. Of course, there's no connection. They can't show the connection to the reduction in crime, but they can say it because, well, we spent more money in community. That must be working, right? They can't show the data that it actually works. You know, we have decades of data. If you flood the zone with cops, it has a positive impact on lowering crime, right? Let's see. So investment programs and a push by police to target career criminals. Think about this. Trump is saying, let's get the career criminals who are immigrants out of the country, and that'll lower crime, right? I mean, the LA Times don't even realize what they're saying. Let's get them out. That'll lower crime. That'll make our city safe, to make blue cities safe. Everybody will be happy, you know. And what does the LA Times say? Well, local law enforcement, the LAPD, is targeting on their career criminals in their city, and that's helping to lower crime. Duh. I mean, I just said that at the beginning of the show, right? You know, if you focus on parolees and probationers, you focus on the people that are in the life, and you take them to jail, you're going to lower crime. 3 strikes, you're going to lower crime. So this is what LAPD is doing, and they're getting credit for helping to lower their crime, and certainly the sheriff's department is doing the same thing. But Trump is doing it, and they vilify Trump and they vilify ICE. You can't make this up. But you know, I have to admit to the regular public, and I'm glad if you're watching my show, that you're hearing the straight scoop from a retired law enforcement officer, somebody who just wants good public policy to explain this stuff. Now, explain this stuff to you, but here's where the LA Times, yeah. So they said, and the fallout from President Trump's immigration crackdown. So they give him credit, but listen to how they word that. The fallout, like it's a negative. This just happened. This wasn't by design. Like the atomic bomb dropped, and we didn't know there'd be fallout. So they dismiss President Trump's initiatives by calling it the fallout. Like he didn't really plan this. This wasn't by design. It just happens to be happenstance. It's happenstance that this is happening. It's happenstance. This isn't really what ICE is here for. They're here to terrorize us. They're not here to lower crime. This is the fallout from it. This is how sneaky, because that means, oh yeah, that's a negative word, using fallout. The right way to say this, and the impact that ICE is having in the region by removing career criminals from our population. That is how it's supposed to be said. So this is This is dishonest by the LA Times. I caught that, and as I was getting ready for the show, I go, God, they're even worse than I think, So, but that's good stuff. The LA Times at least is putting out there that Trump is having an impact. It's just the way they're doing it is dishonest and misleading, just like Mandami. No impact on public, safety. That's bull. Okay, so the next thing up, I got to talk about now. So we had a great reduction in crime in LA. Right, we talked about that. So what's the third largest city happening? Let's go with Chicago. I got a slide there. Now, Chicago's homicides in 2025 fell to the lowest level in 60 years. 60 years. Can you believe that? 60 years. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, this is a city who defunded their police department, and they're still, if you talk about LAPD, LA County Sheriff's Department, NYPD, Chicago Police Department, all of them are way down. They're all way down. So they don't have the resources to flood the zone. They're using their coppers to fill in overtime shifts just to do basic enforcement, right? And just to handle the basic cases that are coming through that need to be investigated by their detectives. They don't have a big surplus of people to surge to do the things that Trump is doing with federal agents. And I got to correct myself here a little bit. I've been talking about ICE, but it's not just ICE. He has surged not only ICE, but Customs and Border Patrol, the FBI, and federal marshals on this mission. As we saw up in Wisconsin with the idiot judge up there, that was another idiot, but she was an idiot for another week, I guess, Judge Dugan, where she tried to help the illegal alien escape. They not only had, I forgot the DEA, they not only had ICE officials there, but they had FBI and DEA there, and U.S. Marshals. So he's flooding the zone with all of the federal resources he has into these areas to deal with these criminal aliens, and it is having an impact. So it doesn't really matter when you defund the police. If we look at D.C., he also used the National Guard there. So he's flooding those zones, and crime is going down. What that does is it debunks the notion of defunding the police, and reinvestment will also be better because it'll all lower crime and we'll all go, dance around the maypole. No. When you pull cops back, crime goes up. When you flood the zone with cops, crime goes down. Now, I personally think it could be organized a lot better, but you know what? We're using federal authorities that we should be using locals to do, but they're doing a fantastic job with the tools they have and the limitations they have. Because, the bottom line is the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, the DEA, even ICE, flooding the zone and having them deal with career criminals that are on our streets is not necessarily their mission. That's the mission of the cops, and sanctuary cities have refused to let those cops do their job. So we just did Chicago. Let's bring up New York City. What's happening in New York City? So, Mandami, you were wrong. Let's see. New York City's homicides, murder sees a double-digit decrease per NYPD data. The numbers of shooting victims, which includes homicide victims and survivors across the 5 boroughs, decreased by 22% from 1,101 last year to 853 through January 6th. So, Mandami, flooding the zone with ICE officials, Customs and Border Patrol, taking away these bad guys who are here illegally, has had a positive impact on public safety in New York City. You may not want to admit it, but it is having, because this correlation, people will say correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. Well, in this case, when you look at Chicago, you look at New York, you look at Los Angeles, you look at all these big cities, you're seeing this big drop. And the primary change that has happened is Trump came in and he flooded the zone with federal officers. You're seeing this drop. So based upon that, you can say correlation does translate to causation. What they can't say is all the investment in neighborhood programs determines causation. That correlation doesn't mean a damn thing. It just means you spent a lot of money and you didn't measure your results. But you can see this over time, and if you understand what you're talking about in terms of flooding the zone with cops in the past, under Bill Clinton when they did the cops grants, and we got a bunch of extra cops on the streets, and we refocused our efforts on community-oriented policing, you saw that decrease you saw that decrease. But here we go. Okay, so we just did New York City. We got another. I guess we got two idiots this week. So I got a video of Mayor Fry, and I got to talk about Mayor Fry here. Recently I talked at the top of the hour when I began the show that the state troopers were out there dealing with disorders, but the Minneapolis police were not. And Mayor Fry says he will not cooperate. Let's run his video.
They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is bullshit. This was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying, getting killed. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. People are being hurt. Families are being ripped apart. Long-term.
Okay, that's good enough for this knucklehead. I don't know when political discourse required you to swear. When you start swearing like that, that means you're losing the debate, right? I don't think I've ever used the F word on the show. Amanda, have I ever used the F word on the show when we're on air? I don't think I have. Because I don't need spicy language to punctuate my arguments. He does. Because he's got a weak argument. That's why he does it. Now, I took a look, and I don't have a slide for it, but I took a look at the homicide rate in Minneapolis in 2025, down 18%. And the feds are flooding the zone there, taking criminal aliens out, and they're also having to deal with all these protesters running around bird dogging them wherever they go. 18%. So he says, Trump says, I'm going to go there and I'm going to lower crime. He lowered the homicide rate. People are alive today. Way more people are alive today because of what Trump did than ICE being there. And this mayor knows that. He knows it. He's lying to you. He's misrepresenting the truth because he doesn't care about his community. I'm going to get into a number pretty quick here. But before I do, I got to talk about the Twin Cities. So they call it the Twin City, Minneapolis, St. Paul, right? Well, St. Paul, they got idiot mayor over there too, but we won't put him on blast, but we will talk about his homicide numbers. His homicide numbers in 2025 are down 50%. 50. And I say it's because of what ICE is doing. They're having a positive impact. They are saving lives. They're not getting credit for it. And we got idiots like this mayor who feels like he has to swear, but he has to swear because his point is weak. He has to drown out critics like me who say, well, what about the 18% decrease in homicides in your city? That doesn't mean anything. And then he'll swear, right? So let's talk about my last slide. I got to bring up this last slide because here's the thing. What this slide shows here is the demographics of the people who are dying. And that the big, large, if you look at the big one in the middle here, that's almost like a big middle finger there. Guess what that means? That is the percentage of African Americans who die of homicide in the United States in this country. And if you look, like the one on the tail end there, one is white, and the other one I believe you got Asians, and you got Latinos, and you got American Indians there, right? American Indians represent a very small part of our population, but they have a high homicide rate in comparison to whites, Asians, and Latinos. Asians being the lowest, whites being the third lowest, but blacks are right there in the middle. So think about what I'm saying here. If I'm reducing homicides by 50% in the Twin Cities, 18% in Minneapolis, dramatically in New York, to the lowest levels since 1959 in Los Angeles, and 80 years lows in Chicago, guess whose lives I'm saving? 52% of the homicides committed annually in the United States are African American. 52%. So when I dramatically decrease the homicides in this country, the likelihood of saving the black lives increases exponentially. So I am saving black lives by surging my ICE agents to these big cities. I am saving black lives by surging ICE agents to these big cities. And that is what the media refuses to tell you. They're lying. They're lying about the impact of ICE. And I'm glad you came to join me again on Briefing with the Chief. I just want to remind you guys to follow my show. Hit that bell on YouTube. Follow my show. Like it. Make a comment. Go to my Twitter page at LHD Jordan, my Twitter feed, and follow me there as well. And like my comments there. And we will see you next week on Briefing with the Chief. Thank you for joining me. Amanda, you can take it away.